At least there's no
go and do
regret,
it.
right? At least you tried it.
No regrets.
No lingering thing. I should have done that. Hi guys, welcome into today's show. We have a regular guest with us today, Sunmin.
Hey, what's up, guys? How y'all doing?
I invited Sunmin in today because we both like personal finance topics, and we saw this together and kind of created a reaction in us to really discuss a bit better with you in terms of income, money, and happiness. This report actually came out by Skandia, but let me share the details with you. They did a survey globally of probably wealthier people, and Singapore came in second place with $227,553 to be happy. That is why you see that thumbnail every day. And what are your first thoughts, Sumin, when you read about this?
I think clearly they are polling very different people. I do feel that number sounds a bit insane. But at the same time, I guess it really depends on who you ask this question. You will obviously get a very, very different answer.
Who we surround ourselves with kind of shape our reality. If everybody in your circle is driving sports cars, then yeah, you come with this number. On the other hand, if you talk to a pool of retirees, they might be very out of touch with income and wealth and stuff. But 227K is annual income to be happy, which I guess if you're listening in, you might also feel a strong reaction against it. So instead of pressing a thumbs down, press a thumbs up for us.
Exactly. And if you take that number, as reality, that means the vast majority, like 90% of Singaporeans are going to be unhappy. That's a very sad reality. That's true.
I think they want us to feel unhappy. That's why. But what are the numbers for overseas? Do you remember anything about the differences between Singapore and maybe the rest of the world?
I think they won't differ that far. And I think one of the pieces of research that maybe another study that you found is that 75,000 from an annual income standpoint is supposed to be like the watermark for you to feel happy.
So
200 over 1,000.
So 75,000. Did they poll a wider span, of different people from different walks of life versus Skandia, who probably polled wealthier individuals?
We probably had to dig much deeper into the methodology, but this $75,000 mark is something that's clearly a US based study. So the context is all US based. Their taxes obviously are taken into account. So I think that's probably an important one when we think about these numbers, right? When people put these out there, especially for Europe, right? You say like, wow, this number is so high. But you realize that in Europe, taxes are extremely high relative to what we are facing here in this region.
Just in case you're listening in and you're thinking what this article is about, right? This 75,000 article actually came up, this research actually came out in 2010. It surveyed people from all over the world, and they found that after 75,000, the level of happiness does not increase, or at least maybe not to a significant extent, past this mark. But below that, people feel insecure. They are not sure if they can pay for housing, food and stuff, and education for their family and stuff. So this 75,000 mark has been there. It's been a well-researched paper, but it also seems a bit outdated, right? Should we inflate this? What's your gut feeling on it?
The context is interesting because that's US dollars, the 75,000, right? And obviously, if you translate that to Singapore in conversion, it's about like 90 over something thousand. Convert that over here. Sorry, if you convert that to Malaysia, that number is obviously much, much bigger in times
200,000 ringgit.
When you do those kind of conversions, and as a Malaysian who's worked in Malaysia and now working in Singapore as well, I can tell you that number is extremely high.
Hey.
It's so high to the point where it's like, if you talk to an average Malaysian on the street and you say that, hey, if you earn 200 over 1,000, how do you feel? I think they're going to be like, wow, fantastic. That's fantastic. Because the vast majority don't.
KL and rest of Malaysia. I'm curious about it. Rest of Malaysia's pay is very different from KL.
It is different. There are some interesting studies. If you are curious as a viewer and you want to go and look for it, you can actually find a chart that shows you that if you are working in KL and then there's an income band, if you're in the bottom of the band, it is actually possible for you to be at the higher end of another state. As in, like, you'll be higher than the highest of another state. So that's why income bands really differ depending on where you are, like, obviously. In
the cost of living is much different from Terengganu, right? Like a less developed state of Malaysia. But what's your best guess on average starting salary for Malaysian graduates? Any idea?
I used to know this number with a bit more precision, but I think right now it's probably still around 3,000 ringgit.
3,000. So if it's 3,000, it's 1,000 Sing.
Correct. So if you are obviously most of the audience, I think, is a Singaporean watching this, they'll be like, "Oh my God, how do you even survive?" But I can tell you this as somebody who, I started my career nearly 20 years ago, so quite a while back. I started at 1,005 ringgit. So that is the to kind of give you the gauge of not only like how low it is, but actually relative to cost of living. But the progress of income growth has not been as dramatic as we would like it to be, especially with the ringgit.
Starting salary growth has been increasing quite healthily. If I'm not wrong, of course, it differs between different sectors. We all know about that. My best guess, gut feeling when I hear a bit on the ground is between 3,000 to 4,500 for majority. I think that will capture a large portion of starting graduates' salary already, which with bonuses, if you are in government service, will be close to 70,000 Sing dollars annually, at least for a starting grad. But just like you mentioned a good point, which is Singapore's taxes are different from US. 70,000, your taxes are not even comparable to US. So I think they are taxed at least 40% or something like that, which means that actually it's not, your basic needs can be filled already. That's my gut feeling.
Absolutely. And even comparing Singapore to Malaysia, the tax rates are also quite different. Especially once you hit a certain income band, you're easily like I don't know, 15 to 20% effective tax rate in Malaysia if you're earning a good income.
That's way higher than Singapore. Good income.
Way higher.
For Singapore, I think above 200,000, then you hit that 15% average tax rate kind of thing.
It is a big. You hit that income band relatively quickly because unfortunately the kind of like spread of people earning, you don't have that many high income earners, which is why when the moment you hit that number, then the tax really kind of goes up.
Because when we speak on this topic, it's always like, we tie money to self-worth, and there are reports, there are studies, and we kind of already know intuitively. We tie a lot of these two things together: money, how much money I make, and how much self-worth. If we don't make enough, we find undervalued, we find dissatisfaction, we compare against friends, we feel bad, kind of thing. What are your thoughts on such a comparison?
Absolutely. I think I'm guilty of it in a sense that I think I come from maybe call it a generation of people who have been fortunate, got a good education, got a decent job, started earning pretty decent money. But once you kind of get on that track, you're running this so-called race with a bunch of people that are similar. And then as you progress in life, that has become your benchmark. You don't think and compare yourself with somebody perhaps, again, maybe not as fortunate, didn't get a good education or didn't go on the right type of jobs or even in the right track of progression. So the moment you lock yourself into that, I'm this kind of person and I'm progressing in this kind of way, then it sets the expectation for a long time. So again, because I was fortunate to start my life in that way, along my journey, things haven't been perfect, but the benchmark has remained that high. So because of that, you always find yourself comparing, like, that friend of mine now is the marketing director of so-and-so multinational company.
Actually, especially past late 30s or to 40s, it's common to reach director positions really. Then the gap becomes bigger because everybody starts off, fresh grad. The gap is quite narrow. But progression, you mentioned, when it comes to 30s, people progress to senior management level. And that's where the real difference really sets in.
Absolutely. And that's why I think for the younger audiences watching this, right now, you might not think of it at all because everybody is roughly the same. Your starting point maybe in your 20s are all roughly the same. Even your friend who's brilliant might still be not very far from you. The moment you get a bit older, mid-30s, hit 40, that's when you begin to see the gap really widen. Yeah.
I fully agree on that. And nowadays we have LinkedIn. LinkedIn, you can see promotion, or 2 years later, senior management, then assistant director. All these are visible already. It takes quite a bit to understand that, sometimes luck plays a part in it. Sometimes there's genuine hard work and genuine craft in building it out. It's not like the other person won and you have lost. Always compare against yourself. I think that's something I suddenly thought about. That should be mentioned a bit more. If you have progress on your own already, I think that's a small win. You focus on that, you find happiness versus you focus on the best of your classmates who's now a director or somewhere big, and you find that gap being too difficult to overcome emotionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we put a number to what is needed to be happy or not? Because what is the right number? If we think $227,000 is too much. What is the real number that you think we can throw out for audience to debate it further as of today? What kind of number?
I think there was a question that when we were preparing for this conversation that was, I thought was very powerful, which is, what do you need to feel safe? And I think that question is a good one to form the baseline, because it makes you think about what you really need. And we all know we have needs and we have wants. So the question of like, what do you really need to feel safe? I think helps you think about, again, like in your life, what are the big three things? Your housing, your food, and then transportation. Without those things, I don't think you would feel safer. And maybe you got healthcare. maybe
healthcare and retirement
well.
also. People say healthcare is inflating, and people say we can't retire early enough.
No, absolutely. So once you got that need there, I think that number, again, it might differ between people. But in Singapore, I do think it's relatively easy to calculate. I mean, you can roughly do your mortgage calculation. You can roughly calculate how much money you spend on food, roughly. So, you kind of form this number. Who knows? Maybe it's I don't know, 4,000, 4,000 Sing. I don't know. But
4,000 Sing, if we times 12 to it, 50,000. 50,000 to feel happy. Now, if we've seen before charts that describe, our needs priority, something you mentioned. Firstly is food. That is psychological needs, safety needs. So then it progresses to psychological needs in terms of self-esteem and stuff. $50,000. I was thinking of a different number, but also it's a good point. We should feel our needs first and really understand that sometimes beyond that, it's just a chase of number already. It doesn't really bring us that much happiness. It also relates to a question like somebody asked before, would you take a $30,000 job that you really like versus taking a $100,000 job that you hate? Which job should you take? Of course, that's very extreme. Just now you mentioned 50,000. Would you think that is the final number that beyond that, the happiness doesn't progress that much more?
I think for me, the question is about like, what does that 50,000 cover? Like, for example, right, if it includes the mortgage, which is why I kind of use that number, I think then probably realistic.
But that doesn't allow someone to take care of family, right? If there are children, parents, correct? Mortgage 2,000, transport, food, that'll be 3,000-4,000. Then taking care of family, would that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one I didn't even factor that in. This is assuming that you had to survive as an individual. With your own. You're right. Once you factor in the family, and like for example, we all want to take care of our older parents as well. That number clearly changes.
Because if not, you wouldn't feel adequate. You feel you are stretched to provide for them. Or like kids, you are unable to buy the things that they want or send them to the right classes. For parents, you might need to choose the most basic of healthcare needs, and you think they're not taken care well enough. Should we bump that 50,000 up bigger now? Because just in case you're watching this on recorded stream, what is your number? My gut feeling is 50,000 covers individual. Maybe you can even segment individual 50,000. Beyond that, you realize your basic needs are done already. And then you shouldn't trade too much of happiness away from it. But someone taking care of family, I think maybe we should add that number at least by 20,000 again, which gets back to the 75,000 mark again before you truly feel it's not necessary much more to go above that. What do you think of that gut feeling?
I think that's absolutely right, because you're right. Once you factor in, you have to care for, again, whether it's kids or care for a parent, the number will obviously shift quite a drastic amount. Yeah.
Hey, and if you want to plan for retirement, sometimes we have discussed before on retirement, previous discussion also, we need to set aside like $10,000 for retirement so that you plan for your own future. Right? You can't work forever, and neither do you want also. But that early retirement is a debatable point. But at some point, you also need to build a nest to retire on. If we add 20,000 for family plus 10,000 for your own retirement, you're taking care of yourself in future. Then could the number be 80,000 Singapore dollars to be happy in 2023? Everything taken care of. Beyond that, don't chase a work that you hate. Is that a fair assessment or not?
I think we are probably very fortunate to be able to add those things in, right? Caring for extended family. Don't talk kids have to, but maybe parents. So sometimes we take it for granted that is a default that we all can afford to. Some people maybe they can't or they don't want to, or whatever life circumstance, right? But the other one is also the luxury of thinking about retirement planning. So if those things are factored in, then I completely agree with you that the number can get higher, especially if you aspire for early retirement or more comfortable retirement.
But 10,000 a year for retirement planning is still not a big amount, correct? You times
No,
20
it's
years.
not a big amount.
Early retirement definitely is a bigger number. It's just something build
Right.
up, like maybe 60, you can still materialize a decent income from that investment pot.
So I think if somebody defines happiness as to include those things, like the future retirement and all that, I think then definitely it needs to go higher.
But then that will factor into feeling safe. You know you have provided for your own future. You take care of yourself now, take care of yourself in future. Does that help in the safety? I was thinking along that lines. That's why I was trying to bump up that number to something that we can all agree on, that is a number to look at, and then beyond that, don't do something you don't like. Because it boils back to the question again. Should you take on a job that pays more but you're unhappy?
I think you raised a very interesting point that even like when I was thinking about that question, right? What does it make me? What do I need to make me feel safer? I actually didn't automatically think about retirement planning as part of that number. I just thought about it from a survival standpoint. Like, what do I need to really survive and get by? So I think that's a good like consideration that we need to have. Like when we think of safety, what are the buckets that we really need to kind of pull together to think about that? So retirement planning, again, caring for elderly or your kids. So I think those are essential.
I think a rounding point is different expectations or different family situation. We might need to move that minimum number a bit differently also. For someone who is okay or happy in a smaller house, then 2,000 mortgage might be generous also. So there are a lot of ways to look at it. And it feels like we're moving towards a number of 50 to 80,000. Depends on your family situation. But there's a consistent message, which is above a certain number, you really do trade off some work-life balance. It could be something that's consistent across all situations. That also leaves us to yet another point that we should discuss with our audiences today. Any tips and advice for younger people, new into the workforce, thinking about money, very happy to get a first paycheck? What are your first words to them?
I think this question of like how much is enough, should I pursue happiness versus money, and I feel it's a lifelong question. It's something that we will all continue to struggle with at some point in life. And I think I wanted to simplify it in my head when thinking about the topic. It's usually a decision between should I avoid pain or should I go towards something that I feel I will like or love. It usually will be something between those two decisions. And then when you start to do that, then it becomes tricky because I think on one hand, the number of like income, right, as a number, it's easy to look at it and it's a tangible thing. But what is tricky is always like, am I going to be happy or not? And that's where I think my few tips are related. Like, how do you struggle with a question that is difficult to kind of like break down? So I think that the first thing is that a lot of times you feel that you're unhappy. If you can really dig down deeper to understand what makes you unhappy about your current situation, I think that's very important because I mean, I've been in my career for 15, nearly 20 years already. And I've seen this across different executives that I worked with before, where they are like, oh my God, I hate my job right now. Then the question is like, okay, what are you hating? What are you unhappy about? Are you unhappy about the project? Are you unhappy about the culture? Are you unhappy about the work that you're doing? And when you start to pull these things apart a little bit, you might realize that you actually, maybe you really like the role, but you just hate the project. Or you really like the role, but you hate the culture.
So that point can be solved, or it is temporary, a transient phase.
Correct. Why is this important? Because if you are struggling with the question of like, should I leave this thing to pursue something that's supposedly happier? Are you doing it for the right reason? And there's no right or wrong, but you have to be clear with yourself. Like maybe it's just the role, or maybe it's just the company, bad culture. And you find another company, you can do the same role, but you feel happier. And you still get paid a decent amount. You don't need to sacrifice the income for something that you might be looking at as it will make me happier, but the role is a bit lighter.
Is there a grass is greener on the other side problem that could be plaguing someone who's thinking, I'm not liking my work. That side looks easier. That side pays more.
I absolutely think so.
Motivation to job hop. Or there's some problem here. Too much already. I try to leave. This is a pain point. People always are motivated to leave because of pain more than pleasure on the other side. So if there's pain now, then the other side doesn't have pain. the gravitation is to go towards there. You're thinking more along the lines.
Absolutely. And the other thing to kind of like just add a bit more on that is sometimes we perceive it to be giving us happiness. And that perception might or might not be true. And it's almost impossible to really figure it out until you actually do it. So maybe my second tip to kind of, and more of a little bit of story is like I did that in 2014 when I kind of like left the industry to go create my own business to kind of build it around a passion. And it was something that I felt strongly about. I did it for nearly 3 years.
What do you build? Or rather, can share a bit more in
Sure.
on
So
that venture?
the context for me is that I work in the advertising industry. And what I really enjoyed at that point in time before I quit is training people. So I created a company. I went out to train different executives in advertising agencies. And that was, again, based off, I wanted to pursue that passion, that love for training and growing and nurturing people. And what I realized after like 3 years of doing that is that while I enjoy it, and in concept, in theory, in practice, that meant, again, a lot of different things. 9-hour days to go and literally stand up and train a group of people. What is the results that you're getting? It's not just monetary results, but what kind of satisfaction do you get from people responding to your work? What kind of, like, again, hour you're building a business, what kind of hours are you willing to commit to build that business as well? So all these realistic things can only be found out if you try. So what I'm saying is that sometimes the perception is there and it's correct for you to maybe want to try. If you really feel for it, go try it. I completely, especially if you're young and you're watching
At least
this,
there's no regret, right? At least you tried it.
No regrets.
Correct.
No regrets.
So you tried it. There's no lingering thing. I should have done that. But once you have done it already, you realize there are hidden parts of that work that you didn't expect. That's actually not that fun.
Absolutely.
Something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It might not even be like it's bad, but when you round it all up, right, you might realize that actually looking at all of it together, maybe this is not the right moving forward. Then you can recalibrate. Life is good in that sense. You can always change, especially the younger you are, it's easier to change. So that's why I made that decision and I came back to the working world to be an employee. And I moved to Singapore and as a result of that as well.
Maybe I can share a different perspective for this question also. Any tips and advice for younger people? Since we're on YouTube, right? Maybe I can share a bit on YouTubing because it's been voted the #1 thing that youngsters are looking at, right? YouTubing seems fun. You get popular, you get likes. But also the part on passion, when you want to be serious in YouTubing, the topic they are touching on is going to surround your day and night also. So if you like this topic, it's easy. But if you delve into something you don't really like, you realize that YouTubing itself, you get trapped in a work phase. You start to realize that you need to chase numbers also. You start to have clients which are sponsors. So there are parts, again, similar to Sumin's story. In any role, it always appears to be something you like ideally. But as you delve deeper into it, there are always chores in every place. So it's not so clear cut. So it also rounds back the question, 30,000, something you love versus 100,000, something you hate. Maybe the world isn't that black and white. Maybe you can find 100,000 that you may not hate that much. I think that's a better thing. Rather than 30,000 you absolutely are passionate about, that also does not exist because there are chores. Whether you do your own business or what, you realize that there are things that you still have to pick up that you may not like that would change the equation a bit. So don't think black and white too much. Maybe look at 100,000 or less than that, something that you are okay to do. Then that's a better answer to going too extreme. Whether 30,000, 100,000, my first take on the advice.
I 100% agree. And maybe just to add a little bit more, right? As if you're going through that kind of like this possible decision to choose between something, these extreme, right? $100,000 job versus 30,000. First of all, you're already lucky if you have a choice. So I think that's the one thing to remember. You are in a position to make a decision, which is you should be grateful that you have that option. That's point number one. I think the point number two is also something I read in a Tony Robbins book back when I was 18 years old. Until today, I still remember it. He said that whenever you're like facing a challenge or a difficult decision, you can change your perception or you can change your procedure. I like that because it stuck to me and it makes me feel as if like, I have the power to decide and choose how is this I'm feeling in this moment in time. If I'm not happy, okay, fine. I can change the way I think about this task in front of me or this role I have. Or If it's really so bad, I change my procedure. How am I doing it? Or can I just leave the industry? But the power is in your hands. And I found it very powerful.
That's a great rounding point. If you have a tip and advice for younger audiences, do share in the comment sections. I think everybody can learn from each other's experience, and hopefully we've shared something valuable in today's podcast for you. Thank you so much, Sumi, for coming in also. See you next one. Smash a like and subscribe. Take care and goodbye.
See you guys. Bye.